Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog Season 2, Episode 16 or 17. I don't know. I'm losing track. And yeah, it is Thursday morning. I have not taken the kids to school yet. I'm doing this in the morning, then taking the kids to school, then come back, and Tim and I are going to record the patch rundown video because patch 16.3 is locked, which is great. And then I'll get to work. And on the positive news, what I will say is the thing I was working on in Futureland, I made big progress on yesterday, so that was good. So it's always nice to finally solve a tough problem and think through a thing. It's always interesting. Sometimes people will come to me with a design problem that needs to be solved, and I can figure out the answer in like 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And other times, someone will come to me and it's just like, man, I don't know. The conditions you're giving me do not work, and you have to think outside the box and things like that. What I will say is I was a little stuck on this one, and then I had a meeting with my boss, and we just kind of brainstormed a little bit, and that helped me get me out of my rut. So it was always nice. And that's the thing. Sometimes, just having someone to be a sounding board and talk through ideas and tell you if you're in the wrong angle or if you're thinking through things in the wrong way, it can be really, really helpful. And the good news is, in this case, it was like, no, a lot of the things you're saying are true, and a lot of the ways you're thinking about it are correct. But have you considered like doing this other weird thing that breaks the rules? And you're like, ooh, actually, okay. Yeah, maybe, and like that really helps. So yeah, it was a good conversation. So yeah, things have been going well. I've been making progress on that. I've been making progress on my health goals. So things are good. I don't know. I'm excited this weekend, 3-day weekend, although the Monday is just me traveling to LA, so kind of lose a day there. But 3-day weekend. The Lorwyn Eclipse pre-release happens. I'm excited to play that. And then I'll be in LA. So yeah. And by the way, spoilers, I have gotten at least one person to show up as a guest, agree to come on as a guest for Walk the Dog while I'm in LA. So you'll get at least one episode with a guest. So I'll leave that for next week, but that should be fun. And I'll try to make that a good episode. My plan is to have him and I ask each other questions. But we'll see. So if you guys have questions you want me to ask guests, I suppose you could post them. But in order to do that, I have to tell you who the guests are and kind of want to surprise you. So yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll get more. Maybe one person doing it will get me more guests as well. So, all right, let's do questions. All right, what is your reasoning for focusing on the top 1% and the bottom 90%? What about the other 9%? Why don't you focus on them? So, realistically, what we're talking about is a couple different things, right? When we're talking about general design principles and what makes a fun set and things like that, we just talk about every player, right? Like whether or not they're top X% doesn't really matter. So in designing a set, that doesn't really come into the equation. What you're discussing though is balance, right? And like very clearly, like the Mortdog or the Monday morning meta reports, they show augments at top 1% and bottom 90%. So top 1% is essentially the most narrow version of high elo we can get without having too small of a sample size. Balancing the game around people because the top 0.2% to the top 5% are a lot of people that are mostly imitating the top. It's like, I think anyone who's played in these elos can tell you, it's like how many people are playing Bilge, but they're playing it wrong, Even some of our top players play Bilgewater wrong. It's really hard because there's like, if you could clone the top like 100 players who are probably playing TFT the best at any one point, but even then, like what's interesting about that concept is the top 100 players, there's probably 30 of them that are like really, really good at Bilgewater, and another 70 that are actually like mediocre at Bilgewater, but they have kind of got it okay. And then they figured out some other angle, right? Like it's one of the challenges of using data in a wide aggregate, but TFT is such a complex game that you almost have to like balance it around, again, like a large enough aggregate for sample size. And the honest answer is like we just haven't figured out a better methodology for looking at high elo, but we do have to balance around the people who play it optimally, right? Like if somebody who has figured out how to play Ishtal perfectly and knows which quests are good and not needs to be the consideration, because eventually that information will trickle down, and that is the most efficient way to play something, right? And I think T-Hex was actually a perfect example of this. And no, this isn't me talking about me knowing T-Hex, so YouTube comments, you don't get to hold this against me. I'm specifically referring to the fact that like T-Hex was an example of, if you looked at it in the data and used the data as the aggregate, it looked bad until someone at a high level figured it out, shared the information trickled down, and then that changed the data heavily. It's always why I say data tells what is, not what can be. But yeah, so all of this is to say that top 1%, the reason we use this is just, it's the best version we can do of high elo that has a large enough sample size, but even that isn't perfect. And that's why you also have to use your experiences. It's also why I try to play so many games when I'm on live. It's like, you really have to understand it. Watching streams can be helpful, right? Like, yeah, it's one of the challenges. Now, as far as the bottom 90% go, generally what we find, and again, this is where I was saying, like, if you look at the top 1% to 5%, right? This is your diamond to low emerald. A lot of them are essentially using the same methodologies and practices that the high elo people are doing, just worse execution, right? Like, if you watch a diamond player play Bilgewater as opposed to a masters or a challenger player play it, you will see some differences. Lobby tempo can also have a big impact, right? So like one of the things I think I see a lot in that like platinum to master range is like lobby pressure is just less. People are less good about building boards as they go, and so you actually don't take as much damage. You can get away with greeting a little bit more. And the boards actually end up like higher power at the end because of that lack of pressure. But again, it's all like the same balance, right? Like nothing that's happening is really that different. But once you start to hit that like, low emerald, platinum, and down, what you start to get is, and this is where I call it the 90%, is this is the people who generally are just kind of enjoying the game, right? Like they play it their own way. And there's enough of them that it's like a massive sample size. Now, realistically, if I was being critical of ourselves, what we should actually probably do is, instead of saying the bottom 90%, we should say the middle 40%. And what I mean by that is like, what I'm actually the most interested in is the people who play, in that like gold to emerald range, who play a decent amount of games. Giving it a number here, I would say the top 10% down to the 50%, because that's sort of like the general experience a lot of our players have. And then below that, and this is one of the interesting things, if you look at like the bottom 50%, we have a lot of players, but not everyone plays, 300 games a set, right? A lot of the players in the bottom 50% are the players who play 10 to 30 games a set, right? People who enjoy TFT, but like maybe they play one game a weekend and they're like, man, I love this game, and that's all they have time for, or they play a lot of normals or whatever, right? Like, and that's where, do we really want to be like having too large of a discussion around players who play one game a set? Probably not. But the nice thing is, if they're only playing, 30 games a set, then they aren't necessarily impacting the data that much anyway. So all of this is to say is that that's just sort of the like general player experience. Because again, if you're trying to make a game fun, you're looking at, your millions upon millions of players. You want to make sure that they're having a good experience. And if you look at the Monday morning meta report, what's interesting is when we shipped the set, I talked about how verticals weren't supposed to be like a primary thing to do, and I think we've achieved that at high elo. But sort of as expected is that because it's difficult at high elo, what we're seeing is in that middle range, verticals are actually doing just fine, if not amazing. And the Monday Morning Meta Report shows that every vertical related augment is overperforming. Noxus is overperforming at that level. And that's something you have to keep in mind, is that's how players are experiencing the game. And that's what we were going for, right? Is like, look, you can play verticals, you absolutely can, but if you're Soju or Dish Soap or whatever, you're going to not really play that many verticals. And that's been true. So actually pretty happy with that execution. So anyway, this is a lot of words to not really say a lot, to be honest with you, because again, why do we use the top 1%? Because that's our representation of high elo without, screwing up the sample size. Why do we use the bottom 90%? Because it's a really easy version of just looking at everyone else that isn't necessarily just copying the high elo and things like that. Now, could we use bottom 99%? We could, but I feel like there is a pretty big difference between a Diamonds 2 player and a Emerald 4 player. I think those two players are having very meaningfully different experiences, and it's worth at least thinking through and seeing their perceptions so that, and it's funny too, because literally, like I would say 10 times a day, I get tagged on Twitter or sent a Reddit DM or whatever of, look at this comp, I can't believe I lost. How did this happen? Your balance is bad. And of those, I would say 80 to 90% are plat or below. And it's very interesting to see. It's like, well, because you had AD items on your fizz, or you only itemized carries, you didn't itemize tanks and things like that. But again, it's still important to understand that that's the experience those players are having. That's the perception they have, right? Like, one of the things before this set shipped and why we changed our framework on 3-star forecasts was I was, getting a lot of DMs about people losing with 3-star forecasts and how bad it felt. And clearly the perception was these needed to be stronger. So, I had the team amp them up quite a bit. And even still, despite that amping up, we still get some people going, oh, this person's like, what was it? I saw someone the other day was like, oh, which forecast was it? I can't remember exactly what forecast it was, but they were like, this 3-star forecast is so bad. And I looked at the graph and they're like middle of the pack and their average finish is a 1.4. And it's like, is it really a problem, or did you just have a bad game? Or does this go back to our nukes versus nukes conversation? So yeah. So anyway, long-winded answer, but that's kind of why we use the top 1% and the bottom 90%. All right. Next question. This one's an interesting one. Could Darius be a carry? Darius is a weird champion, and he's definitely one of those champions I think I would classify as a miss if we look at the result. I mean, clearly on a power level, nobody's using him. But from the design perspective, he ended up a lot like, we talked about the red mage problem. He's a bit of a red mage. A lot of the times in our internal testing, when he was strong and Noxus was doing well, the problem with Darius was you could itemize him with something like Steadfast Heart BT Warmogs, and he would tank as much as a Leona, which makes sense, he's a tank, but also do almost as much damage as the Draven on your team. And that was weird. And from like a thematic perspective, I think our set designers were really happy with that. They're like, whoa, Draven and Darius coming in together and doing damage together and wiping the enemy team. But from a like TFT fairness perspective, we definitely had a lot of like our finalization team who were like, why is the tank dealing as much damage as the carry? That makes no sense, right? There was a while during testing where Darius's bleed had infinite duration. It was just like, once he starts you bleeding, you can't stop. And like, that was a cool thematic idea where it was like, okay, once you get hit with Darius's ult, like, you're bleeding till in the fight. That's it. But what would happen is you would put your Darius in the front, in the center. He would spin. He would hit everybody. Then he'd die. Like, that was it. He'd literally cast once and would still deal just as much damage because the bleed hitting like 5 people was just that powerful, right? And you could even put like, literally it was like Sterix, IE, I forget the third item, might even be like Deathblade. And that was it. It was like a suicide bomber kind of thing where it was just like, spin, cause everyone to bleed, peace out. And like, that wasn't great. And so I think, trying to avoid that, we ended up kind of over-nerfing him. Like the bleed has a duration now, things like that. There's also the execute side of things, which like, I think the execute was a neat concept, but what ended up happening was it's like, even the animation time of it happening, it's like, wait, just go back to casting your heal. I need you to tank. I need you to heal, bro. So overall, I think, again, and this is one of the things we actually struggle with, and I get a lot of criticism with internally, is if you look at our tanks, I think it was Andre who was giving me a little gruff about this. He's like, why are all of our tanks reach full mana, heal or shield, then hit somebody really hard once? Why do they all do that? And it's like, well, because the reality is what people really want your tank to do is tank. And the way to tank is have a big shield or a heal. And like, that's kind of it. And every time we try to deviate from that design, like a Darius, we end up just running into problems or creating carry tanks. And carry tanks are like, well, yeah. Because even using the Darius example, it was like, if you set it up in the right way, you almost didn't even need the Draven. It was just like, Darius be spinning. He'd be, winning games. So the answer to your question is, could he be a carry? Yeah, with the right changes and stuff, because he was during testing. We actually had him as a tank carry. Can the live version do it? No. The live version right now still ends up pretty weak. I've actually played Darius a couple times, because you know how I am. I have to test the things that aren't working. Every time I invest in Darius, I heavily regret it. He is just like, you compare him to a Loris, and you're like, this is laughable, right? Like, Loris is so much better than Darius. But yeah, I hope we can get him there in a patch or two. I know he's not getting any major changes in 16.3, other than the bug fix, I believe. I don't know if that got in. I have to double check. So hoping we can get there though. But what I will tell you is, during development, he definitely was a carry, and he was scary. So yeah. All right. Next question. Why did we remove Crabbrave? So Crabbrave was a fun experiment. Crabbrave stemmed from the fact, I forget what it was, but basically a lot of the times in PvE throughout the years, I've had players be like, why isn't PvE harder? In Underlords and auto chess, specifically auto chess, it was possible to like lose to trolls and lose to some of the PvE rounds. Shouldn't they be harder? Shouldn't they actually be a challenge? And I was pretty confident the answer is no, right? There's mostly supposed to be pinatas that give you a little bit of a break to think. They're a bit of a down pacing in the tempo. But players will always ask for it, and it's fine. And I forget what it was, but I know it was Witty. Witty deserves the credit here. Witty came up and was like, I just want to do a dancing crab. And, because we had Scuttle Puddle before that. He's like, I want to do a version where the crab dances. And he came to me with that, and I was like, I immediately was like, yes, we absolutely should. But then I was like, can it be like a big red crab that actually like kills you? Like it's big and scary and it's like getting revenge? And Woody was like, you sure? I'm like, yeah. If we're going to test hard PvE, I am totally fine with a one PvE encounter where it's like, it's actually hard, right? Doable, but hard. And he was like, okay. And so we made it. We made Crabbrave. And I would say the results were exactly as expected, which is, turns out people didn't like losing to PvE, But I will also say, from a viewing perspective, it was hilarious, right? Like every time somebody died in tournament to Crabbrave was a very hype moment, right? There was even that one game I remember pretty early. I want to say set 8 or set 9. Forget exactly which one, but like a tournament ended with the crab killing 2 people, and it was like, that is hilarious, great stuff. But over time, I would say that novelty sort of wore off. People were like, initially it was like, this is funny, ha ha ha. And it tilted some people, and that's fine. It did what it's supposed to. But over time, like I said, that novelty was like, okay, I get it. And I think the one miss is that it wasn't that Crab Rave was hard per se. It was more that only certain types of carries and comps could actually beat it, right? Like if you were playing any sort of mage composition or any sort of like ranged AD composition, you were not beating this, right? Like hell, even 3-star mages could like barely beat it. But if you had some sort of like melee drain tank, great, you're fine. You'll win, right? Like if you were playing on live right now and Crab Rave was around, if you're playing Slayers with Belveth and GP3, you're probably good. You'll win that. But if you're trying to play Ionia with Yunara, you dead, right? Trying to play Yordles with Vagar, you dead, right? Like, and I think that lack of, it wasn't about like how strong your comp was, it was more what was the specific type of comp you played. And so a lot of the, at the like highest elo perspective, sort of became, if this encounter appears and you are playing a comp that is not something that wins, you're just minus 11 health. Or in sometimes minus 11 health and 1 to 2 items. And I don't think that was a good result for it to be at. And so we made the call that like, you know what, it was funny for a while. Let's take it out now. Let's give it a break. Would we bring it back? Yeah, I actually think we could. But I will say if we bring it back, and I think even Witty was even thinking about something like this, is we would want to do something in a version where your actual comp strength mattered, not just the type of comp. That would be the big thing I would say is the restriction for us bringing it back. Something where, and again, now I'm just making this up. This isn't a real example or thing we're doing. But like imagine a world where the damage happened front to back. Like, you know, so if you had a really good tank, that thing could tank for a long time, preventing the damage to your backline so that your backline could do its damage or something like that, you know. And that would be what it would take for us to bring that back. But yeah, that was why we ended up removing it, was just we didn't want to punish certain types of comps. So okay, I got 2 more questions to get through. Let me see if I can do it here. First one is, what do you think about credits for live service games? Why aren't there credits for live service games? Shouldn't you do it? How do you feel about that? This is a weird one. Obviously, it's not my call, and from a like developer side, do I believe developers deserve credits and recognition for the work they do? Obviously, right? Like, no, of course. From a product perspective, though, it's like, why are credits in video games, right? We always talk about how Riot is player focused. Do players care that credits are in video games? Should we be spending time to put credits in video games? If our time is best spent making players happy, the answer is no, right? Like, if I said, hey guys, the answer is you can have 10 more augments or credits, and this is just a hypothetical example, I think every player is going to be like, but 10 more augments, please, you know? But it's a weird conundrum, right? Because like, I can also tell you personally, you know, I have my name in 8 video games credits, and then I came to Riot, and I have had my name in 0 credits, right? Like, that's just how it works. You know, I know some of the video games have done some cool stuff, right? Like Hearthstone did that thing where everyone who works on it got like a like custom card in the credits or something like that, which I think is kind of cool. I think Lore even did something like that, but certainly not every game does. I know League certainly hasn't. The other thing is that credits are, it's such a, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of like credits in video games, because like I've also worked at a company where like, let's say the project took 2 years and you worked on it for 1 year, but then left, your name's not in the credits, which is weird, right? But I've also seen games that have credits that are an hour long, and it's like, if you happened to be at the office for a few days once, or helped in a playtest once, you're in the credits, and now it's an hour long. And like, does it feel good to be in the credits 35 minutes into a 60-minute credit scene? Is that really, you know? So credits are a weird thing. I think in general, though, what I'll say is that typically in live service games, and especially this is more true nowadays, it's like no one really verified credits anyway, right? Like if you put on your resume that you were a designer on X game, no one was going to like load up that game, get to the credits and go, oh, yep, sure enough, they were right. They are. It's like, cool, they believe you, right? Because that's just kind of how it works. And so I think generally that's fine. And again, this just goes down such a deep rabbit hole because like, but then can people really like exaggerate their contributions? For sure. I can tell you I've seen at least one resume from somebody who was like, I did this and this for, the game. And it's like, well, you didn't quite do all of that, but all right, that's fine. Right? Credits and resumes are such a weird thing. But again, the high level version here is, do I believe every employee who works on a game should get credit? Yes, of course, right? Like even if your answer is like you were in a design meeting and you helped out, like should you get credit for that? Absolutely, right? I am a big believer in making sure that everyone gets credit for their contributions, right? It's one of the reasons why I just told you that like even though I solved this hard design problem, it was my boss who actually helped me, right? He deserves credit because he got me through that mental block I was in a little bit. But do I believe that on the dev side we should spend time to make sure that there are credits in the game? No, I don't. I actually think it would be a not player focused use of our resources to spend time making credits, updating credits, maintaining credits. That is actually not a good use of our resources. And so that is an interesting contradiction that like is hard to resolve. But if you told me, actually, okay, I'm just brainstorming here. And again, this is a Riot call, not my call or anything like that. But if it were me, I think having somewhere on a Riot website that you can just maintain and just be like, here are the people who worked on the game, that would probably be the way I'd go. That way you're not using dev resources. It's still a little bit of resources to keep and update that list. But updating a list on a website's a lot easier than doing it within the game. So I don't know. That's my opinion. But again, I absolutely believe in giving everyone the credit they deserve for helping every single person. So yeah. All right, and then the last question. This is a silly question I've been avoiding for a while because I don't know. People ask me these silly questions and like, I don't know. I'm like, do people really want to hear silly questions? But I'm going to answer this silly question. What are Mortdog's unlock conditions? So if I were a unit, what are my unlock conditions? All right, and this is mostly a joke, but I'm going to go with it here. And that is so let's say I'm a unit in TFT. How do you unlock me? After 12 hours of consecutive playtime, you unlock Mortdog for the rest of the games for that day, and it resets every 24 hours. So if you actually want to use me in a game, you have to play 12 hours first, and then you have it. And so this way, in the back half of the day, you start seeing Mortdogs in your game because it shows that you were at a grind. And if you play Mortdog in your comp, everyone can laugh at you for playing too long and for working too much. And that's the unlock condition. So yeah. So if you play for 12 hours, get a Mortdog. Strong unit, but the downside is you got to work really hard to get it. So there you go. That's my silly unlock condition answer. All right. That's going to do it for me today. Patch rundown. By the way, you'll know it's the patch rundown. The patch rundown I think will come out either Sunday or Monday, but you'll know it's true because I'll be wearing the same pink hoodie. I'm going to wear the same pink hoodie in the patch rundown. So, but yeah, otherwise I have a lot of meetings today. Today's a meeting day. And then, yeah. All right. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.